what is yesterday weather and interrupt pattern? So let me share a bit on the thinking behind it first, why we intend to do this, probably just to highlight this a bit. Again, just want to let you know, we are at the second sprint. We are at the point where we want to write this playbook increment together. Okay, so we are at the point that we are trying to get everybody who's interested to join us to learn together or to explore what is this yesterday weather and interrupt pattern. Yes, of course, on the surface it might sound easy. So, but as I continue to research it, I realize it is not so straightforward. And today, as a product owner, what I'm sharing will be coming from the perspective of what and why. Why are we actually doing yesterday weather? Why are we actually doing interrupt pattern? And what does it look like? What is actually this pattern? And later, when we actually go into the sprint, all of us will come together and really start to reflect what are the really, again, challenges, and how do we supposed to tackle this challenge and do these two patterns right, so that we can have a hyper productive Scrum team. So I would like to appeal to all of you, probably whoever is interested, join us. Yeah, so we can learn this together. Okay, so just want to do a bit of recap. So we just done our swarming and we have already wrapped it up. I'm really thank you for all the feedback just now. I take it as we might have done some relatively good job. If not, probably we have a lot of arrow that start coming in. But of course, I think it seems okay. So that's why not much of a so-called contentious comment from what we have written. So that's why I think it's considered good, and we're going to move this on to something called the yesterday weather and interrupt pattern. So total, there are 9 patterns that Dr. Jeff Sutherland has identified. And of course, if he feels that if all of us do all these 9 patterns well, we will consider our team as highly effective teams. Also, these 2 patterns, yesterday weather and interrupt pattern, is very important. Okay, so what is this yesterday weather? So I think just now earlier, somebody mentioned that it is really talking about the predictor of today's weather. The predictor of today's weather is actually yesterday weather, which is true, which is very true. And that is why how we actually going to do it is that the yester sprint is to help us to calculate the velocity on the upcoming sprint. But of course, on top of it, we also realize that velocity is a statistical quantity with a mean and a standard deviation of 50-50. In other words, you can actually fall short of your yester sprint, or you could be even better. So there's no such thing as 100%. So actually the best practice that's highly recommended, we will use something called a running average velocity to smooth out variances. So if velocity actually goes up to a given sprint, so update the running average velocity. What does it mean? Okay, very simple, blatant. It is about, after you run probably like 3-4 sprint, right? You definitely will probably have some idea what are these past 3-4 sprint, the velocity. That means how many story points, right? It takes, for example, probably like say sprint 1, you take about 10, sprint 2 is 12, sprint 3 is 8. Okay, so if you're going to look back again, at sprint 4, how should it be? How much sprint story point should we actually estimate for this sprint? So very easy, you just add up and average it, right? And divide by 3, in other words. So you will get again 10. Okay, so that will be the average velocity, and we'll set it for the 4th one. But if let's say suddenly there's a drastic drop for the velocity of a velocity sprint 4, of course, like I said, it could be a variance, it could be like you fall short and then you could exceeding. So if let's say you go to 5, so of course when you go to the 5th sprint, you look back again, probably you just look back over the past 3 sprint example. Normally we just look at past 3 sprint, so it could be 2, 3, and 4. And then average that up. That could be the possible sprint velocity of the next one, the upcoming one. So this is what you mean by updating the running average velocity, because you're supposed to update it with the new data. Okay, so in other words, it's just really talking about the yesterday weather data, the yester sprint data, to help you to have a forecast what is actually going to come. Okay, so that is the yesterday weather. And also, what about the interrupt pattern? So interrupt pattern is something to do with interference. Okay, because we all know in our practice, management always like to come in and interfere and say that we want to run this, something really is very important. You need to do it immediately. So of course, as a Scrum Master or even product owner, it's very, very challenging, right? How are you going to manage all this different kind of expectation? So next, then you might actually change your priorities or problem because of all this interference. And you will lead to another kind of problem. You will interrupt the work of a Scrum team during the sprint. So it becomes this very destructive. And all of us learn, right? We are Scrum Master should protect the team, right, from all the challenges or all the interference so they can have a stable sprint to run well. But in this kind of circumstances, how are we going to solve this problem? Because who is the hiring manager? Who is going to be the person that's going to pay you? Is the customer? Is the management? And if we don't actually make changes fast enough, sometimes we might even lose the competitive edge. And so unfortunately, it will lead to what? Failure in meeting the sprint goals and release dates. So how are we going to struggle with this? And very likely, if you didn't do it well, right, it will become a vicious cycle. Okay, the more you miss it, the more the management will come in and intervene, the more we're actually going to spiral downwards, the more you could not actually meet the sprint goal. So this is something that we really want to solve. So that's why we have this, okay, this interrupt buffer on the right. You can see in the green box, we'll actually allocate some buffer in the sprint backlog. Okay, so to understand, so based on the yesterday sprint, the earliest sprint, what is the very likely interrupt? How many story points it might actually happen? So what you can do is to cater some form of a buffer, and then what it happens is that when the PO he was actually being requested with a new something new and risk urgent, he will actually start inserting this critical or to complete ASAP item into the buffer. Okay, so this is how it works. So in other words, because of this interrupt buffer, it allows some space, okay, for a maneuver, okay, for actually some unforeseen work to be done. But of course, you can see that at the end, right, at the bottom, there's something called to abort sprint. So in other words, if things really go, the buffer cannot handle that well enough, then you might want to consider abort the sprint. Okay, it is something that if you're aware, right, this is also in the Scrum guide. So if things really change too drastically, then you might want to do so with very good reasons, because you might means that the team cannot meet the sprint goal. You really need to solve the problem. Then it's better to reprioritize and then re-aim for the right goal again. So abort and replan. So just want to actually show that what I ever said. So as a start, the team velocity forecast is based on the yesterday weather. Okay. And then we will actually put a buffer for unexpected items based on historical data. And buffer size can change. And so, of course, like I said, abort and replan when buffer overflows. So that is really the strategy to handle interruption. Okay. And what you're seeing here now is actually a sort of a mathematical formula. During your sprint planning, how can you actually use yesterday weather as well as the interrupt buffer? This is how it looks like. Okay, so imagine that at the beginning, you have your team actually has 7 people, and these are all the capacity of the team members or whatever they stipulated on this blue color. So this is relatively static, and that's why its theoretical capacity is 27% days. Okay, this is 1 week sprint. And then later, because we know that everybody will be working, so in the sprint planning, everybody says that, okay, nobody is taking leave, or everybody will be coming for work, and then the actual capacity that we forecast is 27%. This leads to team capacity of 100%. So then what does it mean? It actually leads to normalized velocity. What actually it means that because of the running average velocity earlier, it is 230. So we times the team capacity. Okay, so it's with 230 times 100%, is still 235. Sorry, it's 235. So it's still the same velocity as the running average velocity. Okay, but we also understand that there is a lot of interruption and from the previous sprint. So we more or less we try to guess, okay, well, let's allocate about 20%. Okay, 20% to the sprint buffer. So in other words, the team will only aim for 188 That's 235 times 80%. Okay, we only aim for the 80% of the capacity. So the other 20%, we use it for as buffer. Okay, so of course, if you later I will share this slide in the community. If you click on it, okay, you will see this template. This template is not from me, it is from Scrum Inc. Okay, this is how they use interrupt buffer as well as yesterday weather during sprint planning. So it's a really good tool. I would highly recommend you to use it for your sprint plan. Okay, let's move on. So then why we actually use yesterday weather and interrupt buffer? Very quickly, let me share that. So it's to reduce the variances in the team velocity by reducing outside interference, right? So just like I already said a lot on that, and really avoid disappointment or failure or to meet the deliverer expectation. I think all of us know just now, that's the earlier part that I keep saying, if there's too much interruption, you miss the sprint goal, the release date. So a lot of disappointment. Then at the end of the day, in the light of the management, people will feel that, hey, this is not a good Scrum team. So having this kind of interrupt buffer, right, or interrupt pattern, that will actually more or less avoid this kind of disappointment. Okay, and it is also means that we can also avoid shortcuts to meet over ambitious goals. That is trying to answer the part on the yesterday weather especially. So especially in my previous teams, I used to actually tell the team, oh, go for something that's very ambitious. Go for ambitious team. It's okay, goals. Okay, it's okay to go for that. But I realized that actually by doing that too frequently and they keep missing the goal, they actually start to be very low morale. They actually even start doubting themselves. So it's either they could not meet it or maybe they will start to take shortcut and accumulate a lot of technical debts at the end of the day. So that all these things, right, actually is unhealthy and something that we should also try to avoid. That's why yesterday weather is important. Rather, we want to go for something with good quality and then we're not so ambitious, but we really meet the target. Huh? And also take note, this is important, I feel, is to really finish early and pull forward the product backlog and or work on removing the impediments. Okay, because you have this interrupt buffer, what if the management could challenge, hey, you use the interrupt buffer, what if you do not use them at all? At the end of the day, everything is accounted right with story points. So one good thing is that if let's say the team could have some additional buffer towards the end of the sprint, then they can start taking items from the product backlog. Okay, and then or they can actually start working on technical debts or improve removal impediments. So a lot of times this is also one technique we can do is because we have this interrupt buffer, we can start resolving things and then heighten the quality of the work. Okay, so I think this is also a very good strategy, and by then you actually allow room for us to repay back on any technical debt if there is. And then the lead to confident and motivated team with successful sprint. So as I mentioned, if let's say we have a good forecast and then the team can meet sprint, of course the team will be more motivated, more confident, they'll be happier, they'll be looking forward to the next sprint because they are winning. So this is actually very psychological. In other words, if you actually implement this too well, you are protecting the psychology aspect of the people. People morale will be higher. They felt that they are winning team. And I think that is really the secret formula for us to move forward as a successful team. Okay, so that's my sharing. I hope this is useful to everybody. I'm going to pass the time to our developers from now.
Yes.
So Adrian, yeah.
Thank you, Joshua.
Yes.
Before we move on, any final question on this two pattern, yesterday weather and interrupt buffer? Because later part we're going to work on the challenges and what is your recommendation? Maybe I start count. 3, 2, 1.
I think there's a question on one.
Okay. So I will repeat what Ziling has said. Let's say we complete the story 3 days prior to the planned sprint end date, but the next story cannot be complete prior to the sprint end. Would it make sense to still pull up the story which might reduce the team morale? Any idea from this question or response?
Okay, so Ziling, this is my suggestion. So there are two approaches to it. Again, there's no right or wrong. My first approach is you can bring up the upcoming news story. Yes, we recognize that it cannot be completed given the limited time span, but it doesn't matter, right? Because what happens if the user story completes in the next sprint, in an upcoming sprint? Yeah. Because earlier on, when Joshua mentioned about the average velocity for the past 3 sprints, so be it whether the upcoming story has been completed in this sprint or next sprint, it will still be recognized. So that is one option. So I will say you can bring the work done. The work that's required for the upcoming news stories first, right? And continue what is left off in the next sprint. In the end of next sprint, you recognize the story points that has been done in that sprint and the previous sprint. That's option 1. Option 2 would be, okay, we know as a team, the story cannot be complete in this sprint. Either you can break the story to even smaller chunk just to fit into this current sprint, or as I mentioned earlier on, option 1 is to carry on. So there's 2 options. Option 1, you bring the story forward, complete it, then the story points associated with your story, you recognize it in the next sprint. Or option 2, make the story even smaller just to fit into the current sprint. So does that answer your question?
Yes, Agent Ziling here. Yes, it more or less answers my question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Of course, I'm also open to the floor to challenge or to say, Adrian, I kind of disagree with option 1, option 2, I have option 3. Again, we're here to learn from each other.
I think Celine want to say something.
Okay, just want to share my experience. In fact, if we will have the list of the stories prioritized already for the next sprint, right, by then. So if we know the next immediate story, there's no way in the event that there's no way we can break, and the team actually wanted or rather the Scrum Master wanted to motivate the team, they might choose skip a few more stories to take a smaller story up to finish it in that sprint. There's another options that we will do. And or another thing is like you have technical depths. I refer back to Joshua's slide, right? So there's technical depths there. So the buffer actually we use to clear the depths. That's another way of doing. There are a lot of options though. Did not finish the additional story within that sprint does not really motivate the team in a nutshell.
Just want to add on, I think that by the time when the people saw that whatever they planned for, they have already met, it is congratulations, because I'm very sure in the daily scrum, right, people will be very happy. Hey, right, we are meeting the sprint goal already, because you still have sprint goal, right? So this means that you have met the sprint goal. Your velocity chart is towards the end. So I see no reason why there will be a morale issue. Okay, even if let's say they pull something that could not finish by the end of the sprint, because fundamentally sprint goal is already met. Okay, sprint backlog, you have already done everything already. So I think should not be an issue. And as a Scrum Master, in fact, we should actually applaud them. Yeah, as a cheerleader, we should tell them a congratulations to the team. Yeah. So this is how I feel.
I think the same way. What Joshua mentioned.
Yeah, me too. I think the root cause is to address why the team morale might be reduced. So far, I haven't seen any team that most of the teams are so proud that they actually start working on the next sprint stories. Yeah.
That is true.